Yeah, think we are on the YouTube now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the monthly astrology. Once a month, me, Mandy, and Marcus will meet each other here and then talking about the transit for this month. Hi, Mandy. Hi, Marcus.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? How's everyone?
Good. Yeah, good.
Yeah. Cool. So, I think we at this moment we have like a pretty intense transit. Although we don't we talk about last month, but I think in the next couple weeks we have like a Venus changes sign, Mars changes sign, and then we have an eclipse happening. And this eclipse is an annual eclipse, so it's pretty huge, and it will pass, the North America. The whole North America can see it. And this, together with the next eclipse in the next April, is form a big cross, a cross over the North America, especially Texas, and that is pretty intense. That's pretty interesting. So today we will focus on the eclipse, but before that, I think we would like to go examine a little bit about Venus is going to change sign early next week or Sunday. Yeah, and it's going to move to Virgo, right? I think So
yeah,
move to a sign that Venus don't really enjoy. But what could that mean? Marcus, do you want to start with that?
sure, can do. Yeah, happy. So yeah, Venus obviously is not amazingly happy in Leo, but she's okay. But then Virgo traditionally is the sign of Venus's fall, and traditionally a planet in its sign of fall is just, it struggles to express itself. It doesn't mean it's without merit or that it has no positives. Venus is a positive planet. It will always attempt to bring joy or happiness or pleasure. But the problem is that in Mercury's, when the sign where Mercury is most powerful, Venus has problems, because it's like, I try and think of this in various ways. So Venus is exalted in the opposite sign Pisces, which is a water sign. It's boundaryless. It's all about the endless possibilities of love and romance, and just like seeing all the different possibilities, no boundaries whatsoever. But in Mercury's sign, which is all about analysis and splitting things up and knowing what's what, the way I think this often shakes down is that the true enemy of love is criticism or analysis. It's like, so Venus in Virgo is great for, probably Anna Wintour of Vogue would approve of Venus in Virgo, because it's kind of like, it's great for picking the right shoes and matching with the right belt and doing. I have a friend with Venus in Virgo on her midheaven, which is the career part of her chart, and she makes these amazing jewelry, fantastic, beautiful little miniature pieces of jewelry in gold and silver. And that's what Venus in Virgo, the sign of details, and Venus of beauty and artistry, is great at. But in terms of sort of some of the more long-lasting virtues of Venus, it's sort of like Virgo will analyze them into oblivion. so it sort of struggles. So my other analogy for this, I think you guys have heard me say this before, it's sort of like a ballerina who has been injured and has to work in a typing pool. And it's sort of like, doesn't mean that ballerina can't make friends necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean that ballerina won't enjoy some aspects of her work in the typing pool, or in that, I don't know, accountancy firm would be a probably more up-to-date analogy, but it's not where she really wants to be. Do you know what I mean? It's just kind of that. So it's not necessarily super negative. Also, I'd like to point out, and I'll pass it over to Mandy, that just as Venus crosses over into Virgo, the first thing it does is really make an opposition to Saturn, which is not great. But then it sort of passes past that and gets a bit more positive. But I mean, I could carry on, but I think I'll leave that there for the moment.
Maybe, yeah. Mandy, what do you think? Yeah.
Fantastic analysis of Venus in Virgo there, and maybe me think of a few things. It made me think of the idea of splitting hairs. You know, you talked about splitting hairs. You know, that's kind of a sort of, when you're splitting hairs, you're really getting into the small stuff of being very picky. You know, this is like, yeah, that's perhaps Venus in Virgo. Venus is kind of how we relate to other people. So it can be sort of people pleasing, how we get on with other people. And Venus in Virgo tends to express itself by doing practical things, by being helpful. So we go from Venus in Leo that wants to be in the spotlight, whether that's, you know, you get the idea of wanting the spotlight for themselves or in a couple. You know, you see those kind of so-called like couples that sort of shine and they dominate as couples and it's all about the couple. You know, that's more of a Venus in Leo, whereas Venus in Virgo, they're probably going to be at home kind of having a meal together and kind of washing the dishes or something like that. You know, they're not going to be in the spotlight, a very sort of Virgoing sort of couple when you're talking about relationships, and those kind of small gestures, practical gestures of helpfulness. And it's really interesting when you talked about the ballerina, and I thought about I used to know, I don't know what their astrology was, but I used to know a couple of people who were, probably still are, court stenographers, and that's all about, it's like super typing. I mean, you go in 150 words a minute and then you have to sort of translate it, and you need such detail and dexterity to do that job. That's very sort of Venus in Virgo, because Venus is about how you make your money, of course, as well. It's about, it can be about income in some ways. And the people that did best in the job of stenographer were trained musicians, because they were the only people that had the digital, you know, as in your fingers, dexterity to be able to go fast enough, to be able to be accurate enough. So you're going from the very creative, and also the you know, the imagination and the mysticalness of music, which, you know, the opposite of Virgo is Pisces. You almost go in the opposite, straight to the other side, which is incredibly practical and has to be accurate. So that's that I would never have thought of that if you hadn't talked about the idea of the ballerina. You know, like you said, really pleasure in the details, analytical, very analytical. And because the details are so important and there's that pickiness, that's, I think, why in relationship Venus and Virgo can sometimes come across as a little bit controlling. There's a kind of a bit of a perfectionism about Virgo as well. And it's also quite, Virgo can be quite a reserved sign as well. It doesn't have that, it's not associated with that kind of bigness of personality. It's about reserved, and it loves doing things by doing, giving affection by doing and sort of helping, that kind of thing. So I don't know, Rod, what do you think?
Yeah, I like continue to this ballerina story, you know, because it's so funny. Why are we talking about it? And I have a little bit of theater happening in my head. Well, I'd like to mention, because Marcus also mentioned that Venus opposite Saturn. So this is not an idea or not a pretty story or not a, you know, totally joyful story. But another side is I noticed that when Venus just moved into the Virgo, she will kind of align and conjunct with the super huge fixed stars.
Regulars.
So my story will become this ballerina. In something happens, they'll have to go to working in a cashier or, you know, or supermarket or something. But very luckily being chosen as a best staff of a month, and they get a 10-pound Asda coupon. And then still have to go back to cashier and say, yes, make my day. But I still have to.
I wonder if we'll see something about like an ex-supermodel in the news or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like an old supermodel who's like, do you know what I mean? Like, because it's the regulars, the really elevated, high status Venus who's like somehow like, do you know what I mean? Or something about
doing
the fashion
something
industry,
practical and doing
some high-end
something
fashion
practical.
industry like scandal thing, you know?
Oh yeah,
Venus is about fashion and aesthetics and makeup and cosmetics and beauty as well, of course.
And Saturn often brings, with oppositions to Saturn, often bring dish the dirt. Really, they can bring scandal traditionally. Old
stuff coming up, you know.
Yes, yeah. I mean, perhaps not as badly as Pluto, but
Not as
it's different.
As Pluto, no.
No,
Yeah, not as dirty as Pluto.
But different. Traditionally, Venus Saturn was kind of like a little bit sordid, more like Daily Star or tabloid newspaper kind of stuff, rather than Pluto career ending stuff, you know. But
Okay.
yeah, I had one thought from when I think it was something you were saying, Mandy, actually, about traditional view of Virgo. It was a loud voiced sign. So both the Mercury ruled signs, Gemini and Virgo, were loud voiced, as was interestingly Libra. So on what I just went through my mind, Venus is exalted in Pisces. What you were saying about criticism and getting too critical, yeah, Venus exalted in Pisces. The water signs were all mute traditionally. So there's something about sometimes the thing that best supports a relationship is knowing when not to say something. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and Venus in Virgo cannot but say, this isn't right. Do you know what I mean? It has to sort of say the thing, this isn't right. Venus in Pisces are just kind of like, put a bit of Vaseline on the lens, it's all cool, we'll move past this, it's fine. Do you know what I mean? So it's anyway, there's just a little thought when you were saying that. It's like, oh, I've got to mention that. Okay.
Yeah. In another side, I mean, by the around the end of the week, we have the opposite situation happen. It's the Mars. Mars going to move into Scorpio, where Mars ruled this sign. So it's like Mercury, but not Mercury, Venus has forced into the place she doesn't really enjoy, but Mars is kind of coming home, and I really like it. So I will switch this time. So how about Monday start of this run?
Yeah, Mars in Scorpio, we're getting intense now. And we have a very intense, for a lot of reasons, eclipse coming up as well. So with Mars in Scorpio, it adds to the intensity. Mars, of course, is the warrior energy. But Mars in Scorpio, so Mars in Aries, of course, is a warrior that goes forth, right, that acts. Whereas Mars in Scorpio is very much the strategist. Mars in Scorpio has the patience that Mars in Aries, for example, which is the other ruler, the other ruler of Mars. And it has infinite patience, and it likes to be in control. I've told this story probably many times before, because it's the best story about the difference between Aries and Scorpio that I know. Bear in mind that this eclipse we're going to be talking about is in Aries. Some friends of mine, former friends of mine, I lost touch with them, but there was an Aries, very strong Aries energy, and the lady with the Aries energy lost her temper with the Scorpionic partner and picked up a glass of water that was just happening to be beside her, and threw this glass of water over him in the middle of a row without thinking, just acting. He said not a word, walked away, came back an hour or so later with a bucket of cold water, and you can imagine what happened next. That's kind of you don't want to piss off Mars in Scorpio. You piss off Mars in Aries, and it might blow up, but it'll be over. And there's that tendency, unless there's other things in the chart, tendency with Aries not to bear a grudge, unless there's other things going on. But Scorpio just doesn't forget, doesn't handle betrayal. He won't be betrayed. He's very loyal, but once you break the trust of Mars in Scorpio, that trust is broken forever. Secretive and self-protective as well. I think it's a water sign. It's the deepest water sign, I think, and in some ways the most evolved water sign in different ways, different from Pisces, different from Cancer, for example. But there's power in Mars in Scorpio. What do you think, Marcus?
I like that. I love that story, Mandy. That's such a good story. I agree. It's a really interesting shift of vibe, basically. with Venus sort of losing power and Mars having been traversing in Libra for the last couple of months in Mars's detriment traditionally, so not a very powerful place to Mars, into the most powerful place in the zodiac traditionally for Mars. Mars's sign of joy traditionally was said to be Scorpio. It was Mars's favorite sign to be in. So that's really interesting. And I think that's probably because it simultaneously gives Mars staying power because it's a fixed sign, and it has that quality of the water being opposite in nature to Mars. It cools Mars down. It gives Mars a little bit more empathy. But I absolutely agree, Mandy. I have a couple of friends with Mars and Scorpio, and you don't want to get on their bad side because they're lovely people. But if they get angry with you, they'll never change their mind. And I've seen one of my best friends, like I have seen him take this to the next level over years with people. So it's like, well, okay, noted. I mean, but it's a very good Mars in many ways, in that it's got a lot of dignity. So it will tend to, it could, being in Scorpio, increase conflict, but what Mars in Scorpio is good at is channeling that energy in a more appropriate way. So I actually think the net result of this might be, particularly, we'll come on to talk about the eclipse in Libra. I think it's, and Mars has just popped into Scorpio at the time of the eclipse. It might be the ending of relationships that need to end. That's the kind of vibe that's what Scorpio is good at. Scorpio gets rid of things that need to be got rid of. It's like the surgeon, the psychotherapist, you know, it's getting emotional stuff out that needs to be got out. And I think Mars in Scorpio is very good for that. And maybe the fact that you've still got that sextile between Venus and Mars carrying on, that little conversation, that friendly conversation. But here it's switched from Venus having the upper hand and being Venus in Leo. Look at, you know, the relationship on stage, and, you know, it's sort of like the Instagram relationship where everything's amazing, and all the sort of like, any disagreements are being sort of carried out a bit passively aggressively or sort of behind closed doors with a few arguments. And now as this switches, we sort of got, this doesn't mean that everybody's relationship's going to end at all. It just means that if there are some relationships that are now need to go, then Mars and Scorpio will help that to happen. It's actually quite, as I say, it's a dignified Mars. Mars helps by cutting. That's how it helps. So it can be good for that. So this is the classic, if you've got a quote unquote toxic relationship in your life, this can be a good time to end it in a relatively pleasant and well communicated way, because of that sextile to sort of Venus in Virgo. Two other things I wanted to mention: the switch from Venus to Venus there's been an interesting generosity between Venus and the Sun for the last few weeks. Sun in Libra, Venus in Leo. They're sort of in each other's signs. And now when Venus pops into Virgo, there's a generosity between Mercury in Libra and Venus in Virgo. So this is a great, what you're talking about, the stenographer, Mandy, this is actually a super good time to put things into words well, you know? Not a great sentence, having just a slightly unwieldy sentence, but you know what I mean? It's a good time to express things well once sort of Venus goes into it. So if there are any scenarios of sort of relationships or negotiations that need to result in some sort of breaking of or ending of you know, it's like burning bridges, but in a really nice way. It's like a controlled explosion of bridges kind of vibe in it, but with you know, a pleasant sort of agreement. And then
that it kind of needs to happen. But not just for the sake of the explosion, it's because it actually needs to happen.
No, it's not. It's not like Mars in Cancer having a tantrum, or, you know, Mars squaring Saturn and everybody's really you know, just no. It's more. This is more surgical.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And I would just, in the spirit of Virgo that we've been talking about, I'd just like to make a self-correction. I think I mentioned earlier that we've got this eclipse in Aries. Of course, it's not. It's in Libra. But Aries
yeah.
is part of it because the
Opposite
other
side.
nodal axis, the opposite
Yeah.
of the nodal
Totally.
axis,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
important to this eclipse. So just a
So,
little
so
bit of a correction in
yeah.
case anyone's confused.
Thanks, Mandy. Thanks. I mean, yeah, no, but also, of course, I mean, the reason as astrologers we sometimes do that, we sometimes like think because we're thinking about them as axis, like about the the eclipse is happening in Libra, but we know that it's going to affect everything in Aries because it's literally the opposite sign.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah. Even for me, like most of the time, like when we talk about a full moon or lunar eclipse, I always confuse which one I should mention. So I usually say both things, and I forget, and sometimes I read it because I have Mercury in Pisces, so I sometimes totally forget which side the sun is in and which side the moon is in. I just like this Aries Libra axis, and that's much easier. So talking about eclipse, should we jump into the eclipse because this one sounds pretty intense?
yeah.
Okay, I will share the chart with us. Okay, here we are. This is the eclipse chart on the Saturday 14th of October. And let me just double check because everything, because I did change it sometime for teaching. I did change it like a different zodiac or different houses. Okay, yeah, this is all right. So, well, this is the solar eclipse, this annual eclipse, and it happened on 21 degree of Libra, and Mercury is on the side. We have Mars just moving into the Scorpio, as Marcus saying, and it's kind of interesting because this Sun and Moon opposite Chiron are pretty interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Do you want to go first, Mandy, or me? I don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind. I think one important point about this eclipse is that square to Pluto. Pluto, 4 days before the eclipse on the 10th of October, stations direct. It's been going backwards and it stations direct. It's the first of the planets turning direct. As we know, there's been a period where all the outer planets, including Saturn and Jupiter, have been going backwards, and Pluto is the first one to be going direct. I think we have Saturn in November and Pisces in January going direct. So, but when a planet, especially a planet like Pluto, a very slow moving planet that's been retrograde for a while, when it stations direct and it's just come out of retrograde, it adds to the intensity. And the other thing I think that's important to mention about this eclipse is it ties into, because as we know, an eclipse is basically a solar eclipse is basically a new moon. So it holds all the things that we've talked about at length in other videos about the new moon. It's the dark of the moon, but it's especially the dark of the moon. It's things that are hidden, especially with an eclipse. It becomes more intense. The reason it's an eclipse, without going into the technical detail of why, is because it's a lunation. Either it's a new moon for a solar eclipse, a full moon for a lunar eclipse. It falls within certain degrees of the lunar nodes, and the lunar nodes in Aries and Libra at the moment are in a long running T-square with Pluto. That's why it's an especially, I think, intense eclipse. And there's lots of themes for the there's lots of things that you can kind of pull out for this nodal axis with Pluto, because it's about power. We've already talked about power, and I think there's a strong overall running theme about power and empowerment, and how we use our power and how we give our power away, because this nodal axis itself is about the I am, which is Aries, which is the north node, which is where we are going towards, and then the south node where we are going away from, which is Libra. So it's the I am, however you define yourself as I am an astrologer, I am a woman, I am, or whatever, I am clever, I am stupid, I am this, I am that, whatever, however you describe I am, that's very much the Aries thing. Whereas when you go into Libra, it's we are. So how do we find the balance of power between the I am and the we are? How do we stand in our sovereignty, and how do we stand in relation to others, not just relationships with people, I mean with partners, romantic partners, but relationships to the world, relationships to friends, to colleagues, to parents, to bosses, to everyone really, because it's this Libra new moon, like really puts a focus on Libra. And Libra, as we know, is a sign that is about relationship. It's about how we are in relationship, as I've already said, to everyone else, everything else, but particularly in our one-to-one relationships. And do we need to let go of some of the dynamics in relationships that aren't serving us, such as over people pleasing or yielding and compromising too easily? Libra is all about harmony and peace. Do we keep the peace by giving away our power? Now I'll stop now for a bit because I could just go on and on about this for ages. What do you guys think? What's your take on this eclipse?
Yeah, Marcus.
Okay, thanks, Mandy, and thanks, Rod. I think I've already like said my thing in a way, but I think this eclipse is really about ending bad relationships. And I think I say that because it's the eclipse is on the south node, so that takes things away, diminishes, it removes. So I've made this analogy many times, but eclipses are always disruptive. It's like the sort of astrological equivalent of the computer crashing and then coming back on again. The light gets shut off and then it comes back on. And with a south node eclipse, something has gone when your computer comes on again. Something is no longer there. And this is, as Mandy was just saying, a Libra eclipse. So it's about the we, it's about the relations, one-on-one relations to others. And Mars having, as Mandy was just saying, Pluto having just turned direct. So this is, to me, really the culmination of a process that might have been going on for a while. And I say that because this is Pluto's, I think, Pluto's last station in Capricorn. This is the last time Pluto is going to be in Capricorn. Once it's stationed, it's going direct, and now it's going to pop into Aquarius, and it is not going back into Capricorn for another 200 years or something. Oh no,
Yeah.
long time, a while.
I think it might dip back a little bit. I think it goes into Aquarius in January.
Oh, I tell a lie then. So
yeah, and then it goes back again, and then it finally, I think it's November next year, 2024, when it.
Okay, so it's not quite as significant as I thought. All right.
But you're right, though, it is a process. I mean, it feels like we've been trying to get rid of Pluto in Capricorn for a long time.
I do think this is kind of pivotal, because Pluto is here squaring the nodes, and with an eclipse squaring that Pluto, having just stationed just before what turns out, I thought it was its ultimate, turns out to be its penultimate transit into Aquarius. Then it dipped back in and sort of like for one last totally unwanted and unasked for hurrah. But like it's sort of as all the stuff that Manny was talking about, the power games, the expression of power, the abuse of power, just a personal power in relationships to others. Pluto sort of challenges all of these things. I do think, let's say, the one positive here is, to me, that Mars has entered Scorpio and is still in sextile to Venus, so that will help any severances potentially happen a bit more easily. I don't think they'll necessarily be happy, because Venus is being opposed by Saturn at the time of this eclipse. Sure, Jupiter's, and I mean, this is the UK chart for the eclipse. Rod's popped up here, but I mean, even in this chart, Jupiter being angular doesn't cheer me up, because it rules the 8th and 12th houses. So it's the house of death and the house of unhappiness. Great. So I mean, this on a national level, that this will produce some interesting conversations, I think. But on a personal level, as I say, I think the positive side of this is might end relationships which have become burdensome, which have become toxic, and which have really outlived their usefulness. And the positive might be, it might enable people to end those with a little bit of a little bit of political savvy, just saying the right things and cutting loose. And because it's a solar eclipse, it's a new moon, as Mandy was saying, it's like it's a new beginning. This is a new beginning. So whatever an eclipse may remove, and this will very much depend what it where it falls in people's charts, what it's hitting in your chart. It might be somewhere relatively obscure, like maybe for some people it might fall in their, I don't know, sixth house. So maybe their vet will move and they will have to find a new vet. You know what I mean? Or maybe it'll end an illness that they've been struggling with, or you know what I mean? It's not all endings are huge and significant, but for others, if it falls across the ascendant descendant axis, for example, it might end a significant relationship. That could be a business partnership, that could be, or it may just mean the ending of a phase of a relationship, like some difficulties that you've been having. This all has to be expunged and dealt with now in order to re-begin. So that's that's
because to add to what you said, Pluto's process, and this Pluto square the nose has been going on since early summer, northern hemisphere, northern summer, and it's going to be really in orb until sort of at least the end of November. So it's, again, that goes into that process, and this eclipse is just like a trigger point, really. A lunation, especially a strong lunation like an eclipse, is just like a trigger point for this ongoing T square. And Pluto, as you know, as you've already alluded to, and just to say it in a different way, it shows you the hard truths and it strips things away to show you the bare bones of things. And Libra wants to see the nice things. Libra wants to see niceties and nice things, and those nice things might be taken away, and you might see what is really there, and you might actually find the value in what is there. It doesn't necessarily have to be awful, but it's not easy. Things you're not going to look at very easily. It's hard to look at what Pluto shows you.
Totally, I agree with all. Just one word of modulation on the. So Pluto exposes the hard truth. I absolutely agree with that, except that very often when things come up with Pluto, what one often sees and reacts to is the shadow that is cast rather than the thing itself. So, you know, I always think of Pluto as a very small planet that casts a very big shadow. And the shadow is what terrifies people. The shadow is what makes people lose their minds. It's like, oh my God, this is the worst thing. This is my survival. This is the end of everything. Actually, often the real issue is small and dense and heavy, but it's much, much less significant. So that I find that with Pluto transits, and I have Pluto's fairly significant in my birth chart, the issue is losing one's perspective. Everyone thinks about Neptune as being the planet that causes people to lose their perspective, which it does in a different way. But I think with Pluto hard aspects, like here it's squaring the lunation, the exposure of these truths is often reacted to in a way which is very distorted. It's very, very, it's not just fear, it's sort of primal survival fear. It's sort of like, we need to fight this, we need to overcome it. And that's where the crazy comes from with Pluto potentially. So I'd say with any Pluto hard aspect kind of lunation like this, if people find themselves being triggered, or if events come up that make you feel like you're having some kind of power struggle, take a step back from it. Do some meditation, do some breath work, just take a step back from it and try to, because what you're looking at with Pluto transits very often, or if Pluto's hitting things in your chart, is the shadow. That is what you're reacting to. And it takes a while to sort of think, what is the actual thing, which is often much smaller, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if we put that, of course, we put that into the political arena, because Pluto's in Capricorn after all. It's hitting the Pluto return, still hitting the Pluto return of the USA. So that's interesting to what are we seeing? Like you said, Marcus, I totally agree. What are you seeing? How are you seeing the perspective, or not seeing the perspective? And it's very hard to see the perspective under an eclipse, particularly under a solar eclipse, because you can't see. It's the dark of the moon. You don't know. Eclipses take a while to process, and you might not know for weeks or even months what this eclipse means to you if it hits your chart in any kind of direct way. It's a process. Something might happen on the day of the eclipse, but it's not as likely, really. It's very much you might see something happening on
Yeah.
there that might be resonant of the themes that are to come, so that you can kind of prepare. But that process goes a kind of a longer way forward. I mean, if you're you know, for example, if you have an eclipse, this eclipse falls on your, you know, on your birthday or very near your birthday, it can in the longer run be quite a life-changing experience, or it can reflect life-changing experiences, because astrology reflects life, it doesn't cause what happens to us, in my belief system anyway.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah, I agree with both you. Especially, it is quite interesting because before today's program, I was prepared, you know, another bit of writing some weekly forecasting, and then I went back to check the solar circles from the Benedict Bradley's book, the famous, the great book to check the solar eclipse and the solar circles, and I was to find out this solar eclipse with the solar circle number was like a south node solar circle number 7, and it was repeated 2005 and 1933, and also I think in the beginning was the first solar eclipse of the solar circle was happened in 1248. Very interesting, yeah. 1248 is a young one, to be honest. 1248 is a young one, and so what she mentioned is the first solar circle of this solar eclipse also have Mars square Pluto.
Oh, okay.
Indeed, that's how I feel when I first say, oh, but I agree with you, because when you both say, look at Mars and the Pluto casts, like small Pluto casts a huge shadow. Another way I would support what you say, because Mars, the square between Mars and Pluto are separating, move away. So could be past shadow, the shadow from the past, make us say, no, we need to protect ourselves. Oh, crisis coming, we need to get ready. But it's not that urgent or something, but more like psychologically, and more like, you know, you be scared of something.
Yeah, it's sort of like I feel with this one that, and this may be more, I've got to be careful of, I'm trying to just read this chart and this sequence of events rather than projecting my own, because obviously the Pluto at 27 degrees Capricorn is triggering lots of things in my chart, and has been for the past 3 years. It's been great. I'm saying that with deep sarcasm, but so I'm kind of seeing this as the last sort of hit in a sequence. But the interesting thing is, I mean, for my transits, it doesn't quite go, Pluto is retrograded almost to the minute, but not quite to a last hit. So I'm suspecting I may be projecting my own reading on it, but I don't think so. What you've just said to me there makes me think I'm not as well, Rob. The fact that in this lunation Mars has literally separated from a square of Pluto and is now in a separate sign. The fact that we've got the nodes have just shifted, and this is obviously one of the first nodal things in Aries Libra, one of the first eclipses in Aries Libra, but already it's moved, that the Pluto is moving away from a square to the nodes. So, you know, the fact that Pluto is separating from the square to the nodes, or the information you've just given us, Rod, about the fact that this Mars-Pluto, this cycle of eclipses began centuries ago with a Mars-Pluto square, and we've got Mars is separating from Pluto here. And the fact that it's a south node eclipse in Libra, just to me suggests that, yeah, it's sort of like this is ending some relationship or something that needs to be ended. And yeah, it might not be nice, but it does feel like there's an opportunity here to sever some things that need to be severed. The way is probably how I think of it.
I agree. I would like to introduce another character into this story, actually, which something that isn't shown in this chart, but it's something that I have been pretty much obsessing over recently in learning about. It's the dwarf planet Eris. That sits Eris sits at 24 degrees of Aries, and you can see there. She's sitting in between Chiron and right on the north node there. So she's very much part of this picture in my view of things. If you don't know Eris is a fairly recently discovered, in the greater scheme of things, dwarf planet. She is named after the goddess of discord and strife. She is disruptive, but I think when we look at how she's manifested, I think she's disruptive potentially in a positive way. One of the first acts of disruption that Eris performed was to disrupt the very sequence of the solar system, basically, because when she was discovered, they were finding lots of other things at the same time. So for Eris, they invented a new designation of dwarf planet to accommodate, because otherwise they would have had too many planets, which meant that we talked about Pluto being small marker, small, but very, very intense and very heavy. It's like physically, it's a very heavy planet. Pluto was then demoted to dwarf planet in time. So she really disrupted things. She is, in the myth, the sister of Mars. So she's that warrior energy to the Mars energy. And she basically speaks in modern charts. She seems to be very significant in the charts of very influential feminists through history, and also very significant in the charts of paradigm shifters, people that, for example, the idea that the Earth isn't at the center of the solar system or the center of the universe. That was the paradigm. In the charts of the people, who posited that actually we go around the sun and so do all the other planets, when that was first posited, that was heretical, and you could be jailed or worse for saying that. So she's a paradigm shifter as well. So I think that's really interesting when we're talking about relationships and power struggles in relationships and the power dynamics within relationships. I think Eris is quite an important character in all of this. When you look at it in mundane, you can see in the world, I mean, certainly in the UK, just very, very recently, there's been some really fucking awful public misogynism that's been happening. And when we think about this Pluto return, which is all tied into this eclipse for the USA, when you think about the misogynism of, for example, Donald Trump, I don't know the exact quote, but he was accused of sleeping with some kind of woman, and the misogynistic response was, why would I sleep with her? Look at her. And there was a very, very kind of similar kind of comments made on a national news channel by a commentator recently in the UK, misogynistic things about a female journalist. And I think Eris is kind of showing us those things. Now, Eris doesn't take any fucking prisoners. So she basically threw a grenade into a wedding on Olympus that she wasn't invited to.
It was a grenade in the form of a golden apple, wasn't it?
Golden apple, which created a war. She's a warrior female. I think when she was first discovered, she was nicknamed Zaina, the warrior princess, after the TV character. So she's uncompromisingly unapologetic for wanting to have her rights. She wasn't invited, and instead of going off and having a cry about it, she went anyway, and she caused as much disruption and mayhem as she could. And it's interesting that she's part of this eclipse in Libra. Now, there's nothing worse than Libra for not being invited to the party or not being seen as the most attractive. And that was the golden apple was for someone to vote who was the most attractive. It says,
the fairest.
Who was the fairest, the most beautiful. Yeah. So I think that's definitely one to watch. I certainly have been doing a lot of work with Eris recently, and she's part of this, and we are sort of looking at power dynamics. And one of the power dynamics and the power struggles in relationships we've been talking about, Marcus, is, you've been talking at length about how it's about letting go of relationships, or relationships ending, or ending sort of certain dynamics in relationships, if not walking away kind of thing. And Eris perhaps gives the power to do that without compromise and say, I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to do the worst of Libra, which is compromise to my own detriment just to please other people. I'm going to do what I want and be independent, which is very Aries. Now, she's been in Aries since 1923, and she'll be in Aries from until 2048.
Wow.
So pretty much, unless you're in your 90s, you're going to have, everyone's going to have Aries in their chart.
Yeah,
So there's
yeah,
that kind of warrior female in all of us, whatever our gender is, you know. So I just thought I would share a little bit about her because, as I say, I'm a little bit obsessed with her. When I saw her as part of this eclipse, I thought there's something to say there. She's got something to say. She has a message for us.
She's sort of at the midpoint between Pluto and the lunation, actually, at 24 Aries,
exactly.
isn't it, really? So it's really tied in.
Standing up for yourself, it's just as simple as that, perhaps. For some people, being able to stand up for yourself and not getting involved in those psychological power struggles.
Yes.
You know, that you deserve to be loyal to yourself. You deserve to get what you want. And, you know, and in a non-violent way, I wouldn't suggest that you would do it in a violent way, like in the myth. I think you need to get noticed to get your point across, right?
Agreed. And I think that's, as I say, my feeling about Mars having moved into Scorpio will help, because Mars in Scorpio does not immediately resort to violence. It will, I mean, it can be very ruthless. It could, but it will take its time. It will kind of emotionally process, feel its feelings, then make a plan, and then do the plan. And I think that if anybody is experiencing relationship difficulties this month, or some kind of partnership is coming to what looks like an end, or there's a terminus, or there's something needs to go, then the note from this is while people might be feeling kind of a bit triggered, maybe not as much as if Mars was still in aspect to Pluto, but triggered in a different way. As I say, it's more like power battles. It might feel like I don't want to let go of this because I'm letting go of all this, you know, your identity might be tied up to it, your security might be tied up to it, the sun moon stuff, you might feel like but actually take a step back from all of that shadow stuff, feel those feelings, and then make the plan to do the exit, because if the thing needs to go, then it needs to go. And I think that's a little bit of Eris sometimes is necessary. Sorry, that's a little bit of a metalog outside my window right now.
What is that?
Well, when we started on this video, my cat who's sitting next to me was snoring very loudly. I'm surprised you couldn't hear the cat snoring.
We didn't hear anything. We only hear
about a deep sleep now.
Just as I mentioned Eris, some lunatic on their motorbike outside started revving it. So that's perfect.
Yeah. That was so interesting. And well, thank you, Mandy, for bringing out that Eris. I think it's worth to pay attention on that Aries, because it's really right opposite the new moon, and then at this moment, and also with nodal axis. So I think apparently at this moment the Mars Pluto square also have Aries involved in it. If we have to interpret it, that would be take into account about that this harmony and also, you know, fight for yourself things. And I really like that idea. And also thanks Mark for bring this, you know, the focus on the relationship things, because I think that's definitely about a solar eclipse happen on the Libra area. That's definitely going to pay attention on the all sort of the relationship. Well, I think it's about time, because we talk. I think it's you know, nearly 10 to 9. So thanks everyone for watching today's monthly talk. We talk about the Venus in Virgo, and Mars going to move into the Scorpio. Also, the solar eclipse going to happen on the 14th of October at the 21-degree Libra. And it is kind of a heavy, because also Mandy just mentioned the first stationary outer planet stationary begin during this time, and the Pluto started, and then coming up will be like Saturn and all the others coming, so started to stationary and turn direct motion. So worth to pay attention, especially I think at this moment we have that the tendency of the huge thing is coming up or something. So I don't know what's coming up, but it would be interesting. Pay attention on it, and I would like to use this chance to do a little bit of advertising for a lot of things. The first is very nice for the AA conference, for Astrological Association conference this year is over next weekend. So it's from the 13th to 15th October. And we have so many astrologer lines up. And if you haven't registered yet, please go to Astrological Association website. And there's a discount code there. Please use it and enjoy it. And another one is our conference, is AA conference, online conference. It's from the 1st to 3rd of December. And both Mandy and Mark is going to give a talk. We have a great lineup too. So please join us. It will be online and much easy to join with us. And for next week, because usually we have mundane astrology discussion on a Friday, but that will be the weekend of the conference. I will definitely take that time to enjoy my time, to hang out with my friend, with Monday, have a drink with all the friends. So I decided to move the mundane astrology discussion to Wednesday night. So please, if you are our follower, please remember it's on the 11th of October, Wednesday night. We are going to talk about the recent what's happening at this moment around the world, and also associated with this eclipse. We are going to talk about it. Okay, thanks everyone, and let's see you next Wednesday. And thank you, Mandy, and thank you, Marcus. Bye bye.
Bye.